A few months ago, me and Gala became mutuals on Instagram, and she DM'd me being like, "Are you the guy who did that Drake thing?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, but yes." um, and I'm so happy that you've made something for this. And so Theju and Gala will present uh, something called Drake Theater.
We're going to do one. We're doing a fully joint presentation. We'll just begin by saying this is a surreal moment for us. We've been talking about this for a really long time before Ruby and I connected. A friend of mine heard that we like to discuss Drake in our free time and suggested that we next year produce something to present at this symposium, Sixposium. So we're so excited to be here. I'm an artist. My name's Gala, Prudent.
My name is Theju. I'm a designer and a Drake theorist. I feel like I've had this inner monologue going on in my head for maybe 10 years, and I'm so glad to finally share it with you.
So yeah, on that note, we invite you to enter Drake Theater. Next slide, please, and press play.
We've all seen the footage. It's like really hellish, the screaming. On each of the 50 nights of the Tall Blur tour, Drake navigated through a seemingly endless throng of adoring fans on his way to the stage, engaging his fandom at micro and macro levels. There he is, being kissed by a beautiful woman. On the mega screen in the arena, on your phone as you scroll Instagram or TikTok or even YouTube Shorts, from the comfort of your bed. In each performance of his opening stunt, in which Drake emphasizes his godlike celebrity simply by producing a juxtaposition in proximity to the masses at his concerts, the power of his presence relies on an awe ignited by impossible intimacies with his grand figure. But all the while, his trajectory is clear. The moments of Drake's physical, spatial, and spiritual contact with his audience are simply passing delights as he makes his way to where we all know he belongs, the stage.
Drake's method of theater expands the notion of epic tragedies to its most complex juncture, the circumstances of real life in real time as it is experienced and consumed online. This draws the epic tale of Drake alongside the most defining and classic narratives of modern civilization, Don Quixote, the Odyssey, and Shakespearean plays, but expands the roles of authorship to involve Drake's entire audience from mega fan to hater as they digest Drake media towards the crafting of his broader narrative. This unconventional relationship in which Drake's figure has become so large that he's lost full control of the steering wheel paints every observer an equal writer of Drake's story. We are observing, experiencing, and directing epic drama in real time rather than receiving a fully conceptualized or complete theater. Memes have become the medium through which Drake theater is enacted, as we've seen today. Our dissection of Drake theater will take place in 3 acts. Next slide, please.
Act 1, Drake on stage. Another brief video. I think they were timed at certain points, but it seems like it's not working. Oh wait, no, it's good. Incredible stuff. Drake's relationship with the stage predates Drake as we know him now. He broke into our collectoral cultural consciousness, as we just discussed, when he was Aubrey Drake Graham, costumed as Jimmy Brooks on Degrassi. On the show, where Graham plays an often misunderstood mixed-race high schooler, his characters struggle as he shifts out of his adolescence and into something more sinister. Jimmy Brooks' defining moment of the show is when he becomes a victim of gun violence in school at the hands of a spiteful classmate. The injuries he sustains transforms Jimmy Brooks into Wheelchair Jimmy, who Graham continued to play for 2.5 seasons before leaving the show to pursue his career as a rapper.
Next slide, please. The birth of Drake the rapper was deeply complicated by the events in the life of his on-screen character, with Graham threatening to pull out of the show for fear that Brooks' state of disability would tarnish his credibility as a burgeoning player in the hip-hop scene. Next. The performance of one alter ego directly opposed the aspirations of the other, and Aubrey simply couldn't accommodate them both. While Drake and the trappings of his current persona are distant from Graham's complicated performance as Jimmy Brooks, it's undeniable that Drake begins and ends on the stage. At It's All a Blur, his physical journey to the stage only restates his surreal stature and ultimately the blurriness of his theater. Now off of the TV screen, the spectacle of his performance, akin to his entrance to the stage, hinges on the participatory nature of his audience. Next, and play. This is a really special one, so watch closely.
Drake's catalog is self-referential, uses his own character as an instrument for identification, allowing his audience to engage in broad topics and perspectives. For example, feeling scorned by women or staging or desiring money. As methods of self-making. In his physical performances, Drake balances the ubiquity of his character by leaning into the specificities of his personal history, playing iterations of himself in a musical theater spectacle where he is the protagonist in a classic hero's journey for all to see. Next slide.
On stage, Aubrey Graham and Drizzy become interchangeable characters in hazy recountings of his rise to fame. A one-man show in which the umbrella of Drake represents a spectrum of characters and meanings and is actually taken on by multiple actors and animated beyond the limitations of shared physical reality through technology like real-time AI deepfakes projected onto the Jumbotron in the arena. Drake's onstage performance delivers his most popular music through the vehicle of the hyper-unreal, symbols that surpass reality in order to articulate the severity of his trials and tribulations. In It's All a Blur, Drake and all additional versions of his broader character exhaust the most absurd potential of the theater, posing in massively surreal scenes. Next. Drake raps, "Look What You've Done," on the couch to a younger lookalike in the role of Aubrey. Next.
Drake navigates a world where giant sperm and inflatable big-breasted women float through the air.
Next. Oh, that's a GIF that's supposed to load, but it's okay. Go back. Just imagine Drake shooting, well, I'll tell you. Suddenly, Drake mutters along to Controlla while suspended in a floating gazebo, donning a cowboy hat and shooting smoke out of a modified gun. Next.
In the next moment, he's all alone in the round, wearing a knocked-up bulletproof vest with a red laser trained on his heart while performing Enemies to an enthusiastic crowd. They're all about that street shit.
Next. Drake pats the head of an actor in a fetish-like wolf costume while rapping to all of his hypothetical dogs in the audience, hitting the nail so on the head that every attendee may as well be his henchman, each with an OVO prefix to their name. Next. In what space, other than the theater, would it be possible for a character to traverse these seemingly untethered situations so seamlessly? How is it possible for Drake to execute time travel, suspending reality to converse with a digitally modified caricature of his younger self, and physical travel, bringing both the battlefields of the Six and the beaches of Turks and Caicos to standardized multipurpose stadiums around the world? The answer is not magic. The answer is theater. Go back. Sorry. We're going to sit with this image for a minute.
The unreliability of Drake as a narrator expands into his dreamlike universe on stage, where reality cannot be reliable. The images on the large screen do not reflect what is being performed. Drake's likeliness is both omnipresent, both by design and desire. On stage, Drake goes above and beyond the expectations of a normal pop music performance, which proposes that the concept and quality of his concert should translate seamlessly into a prevailing narrative about his artistry, his character, and the quality of his music. Drake offers something more in the chaotic range of characters he enacts with seemingly no rhyme or reason. He takes on a Dada theater, and in the chaos, the seed for an infinity of Drakes is planted.
Next. Act 2, POV Drake steals your girl. And please stay here.
Of course, Drake's performances are not limited to the physical stage. He extends the slipperiness of his characters into off-stage, Drake-authored skits, which he makes in collaboration with creators like Drewski and Ben Dodon. Across topics and narrative styles, the unifying trope of these skits, produced for the smallest of screens, like Instagram Reels, is that Drake always plays Drake. Drake is among one of the most memed rappers of the internet age. So much so that his name alone can be used in the production of verbal memes like Drake the type of dude to say oopsie daisy after dropping something. Drake acts as the flexible foundation for a format in which the character traits of normal people are made funny by association with Drake and all simultaneously niche and broad-ranging motifs he has come to represent.
Drake the type of dude to float while smelling a pie.
Drake the type of dude to wiggle his fingers and say, "Don't mind if I do," when seeing a box of donuts.
Drake the type of dude to wear a swim shirt.
Drake the type of dude to get a yeast infection from a bath bomb.
Next slide.
This is a special one.
Drake is aware of his cultural power. In his skits, he takes head on the format of Drake the type of dude too, effectively closing the loop on critiques of his character and his caricature. Drake making Drake the type of dude content while being Drake produces a distinctly theatrical double bind, which at once legitimizes and pokes fun at all critical observations of his character by his audience. His explicit performances of himself in various silhouettes, as a womanizer, as a slimy friend, as a drug dealer, open the field for Drake to become anyone, and in return for anyone to take on Drakeness. Even Drake skits not authored or performed by Drake hold the potential to become viral, canonical elements of his wider genre and general public perception. Next.
This doesn't mean food, but you got an honor roll. I don't know, but I don't know.
We know the next one. This is an omnidirectional and unsteady relationship between actor and character. All of Drake's avatars muddy the distinctions between his real self and his performed self. This obfuscation of a clear character relationship, for example, Stephanie Germanotta plays Lady Gaga, launches Drake's entire oeuvre into the zone of the unreliable, which is why when someone else pretends to be Drake for the purposes of a meme, we could suspend our disbelief for just long enough to get the joke. In other words, Drake's code is open source. The terms of his theater allows for anyone to get on stage in his costume, even if for just a moment. Next slide.
Providence definitely in the building. Providence definitely in the building.
Act 3, the Pookie Bear Drakey debacle of 2024.
Next slide, please. Oh no, wait. Oh, how are we gonna?
This is gonna just
Okay. If you want to see the full, like, we have a compilation of probably 45 memes that look just like this that are supposed to play right now, but if you want to see them, we'll send them to you later. Just as Drake has enemies, he has observers and impersonators. Drake's online avatar, @ChampagnePoppy, breaks the boundaries of its own packaging, just as Drake's onstage presence surpasses the capacity of the arena. Drake fan pages act as the most democratic and on-the-ground manifestations and meeting zones of Drake lovers and haters alike.
@Pookie Bear Drakey is one of those fan pages, locked in on a specific iteration and aesthetic zone of Drake's various presentations. As the name suggests, Pookie Bear Drakey centers on compositions in which Drake occupies his cutest, zestiest persona, lovingly named Pookie Bear.
Pookie Bear Drakey is adjacent to the meme version of Drake, who would see his arch nemesis and say, well, 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 or say ouchie after stubbing his toe.
Pookie Bear Drakey has crafted a concise visual rhetoric in a closed universe of symbols, recycling a core set of images towards a seemingly infinite range of meme scenarios, in which Drake becomes an agent of meeting through which to discuss everyday experiences. The administrator of Pookie Bear Drakey is a high school student from Houston, and as her character has been gradually revealed in her live streams and occasional story Q&As, it's become clear how Drake as Pookie Bear is a tool for her to connect with other young people online about the banal absurdity of their everyday lives.
Pookie Bear Drakey is a prolific account, publishing over 152 posts since its founding in mid-December of 2023. In that time, Pookie Bear Drakey has devised inventive methods of meaning making through the nature of repeating and restaging the same images ad nauseum, acting as an interlocutor between absurd Drake-authored content, mostly harvested from his Instagram stories and other ephemeral offerings on his official platforms, and absurd or embarrassing everyday experiences in the life of a teenager. For example, introducing yourself on the first day of school or spending real life money on Roblox currency.
Next slide. Pookie Bear Drakey once exemplified a perfect Drake stan. The administrator often posted multiple original memes a day, devoting the equivalent of a part-time job's worth of her time to deepening the lore of Drake. However, on August 5th, 2024, nothing was the same when Pookie Bear Drakey changed their handle to Pookie Bear Kenny, becoming yet another avenue through which the Drake-Kendrick beef of 2024 was aired.
To announce the shift, the newly minted Pookie Bear Kenny posted a picture of Kendrick Lamar drenched in the aesthetics of Drake as Pookie Bear, donning a cutesy Hello Kitty filter. The caption, simply plot twist, at once a coded reference to Drake's recently revived Finsta account and a declaration of the administrator's disidentification with Drake and his associated symbolisms. The reaction from her following was swift and severe. Within minutes, the Pookie Bear Kenny debut was met with scores of hateful comments. Sorry. Demanding that the administrator restore the page to a lighthearted Drake-focused environment rather than to take on the external politics of the beef.
That's not me. Wait, go back. Different Theju. Of her decision to make such a radical shift for the direction of the page, the administrator behind the account expressed on a live stream that she could no longer defend Drake's behavior, and that it was the severity of the Drake-Kendrick beef that pushed her to make the change. Despite her justifications, she was met with immense pressure from her audience in the form of threats to report and unfollow the accounts. Soon after, Pookie Bear Kenny was again renamed to Pookie Bear Drakey, and the account was restored to its original scope of content. Thank God. The Kendrick as Pookie Bear posts are now merely traces of a cultural conflict that has now been overwritten by the force of Drake's stand-up, buried under dozens of memes featuring Drake in traditional Pookie Bear style.
Why did the Instagram audience so readily reject Pookie Bear Kenny? Kendrick's failure to function as an equally malleable and identifiable character is an element of his cultural design. His meaning as an icon and as an artist is too tethered to his real-world experiences in which he uses autobiography and poetry as methods of pointed social and political critique. While Drake employs some overlapping symbolisms with Kendrick, Dreezy's success hinges on his ability to be a completely liquid character, slipping in and out of ethnic and cultural performances and even linguistic styles. Just as Drake must be a character capable of surreal embodiments on and off stage, Pookie Bear Kenny plays on Drake's intentional ubiquity, which enables him to be the perfect tool for talking about a diverse and yet distinctly non-political set of realities.
Pookie Bear Drakey is a microcosm of Drake theater, in which a range of characters and signifiers dance under a shared umbrella in a landscape of absurd and impossible scenarios. The fan account represents a stunning transmutation of Drakeisms beyond Drake's embodiment, his physical performances, or even the universe of his authored media. Pookie Bear Drakey articulates the profound vibrancy of the versions of Drake where he himself is entirely absent. Ultimately, Drake is at his best. At his best is also Drake at his most abstract, when he becomes something unarticulable, nebulous, and ultimately deeply collaborative.
Next slide, please. Oh, wait. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Here, you say this word.
Epilogue, Drake related everywhere.
What makes up Drake? Ultimately, Drake is a collection of personas on a constantly traveling set. In other words, Drake is theater. Drake's universe of performances is not just taken on by Aubrey Graham, he is also Champagne Poppy and Drizzy Drake. Next slide. Also supposed to be a GIF where he looks into the crowd and sees himself there in the form of a doppelganger. This setup, in which the function of Drake is to mean just enough to slip into any context, is enabled by the breadth of his authors. In the chaos, many opportunities for pop cultural fabulation arise along a broad spectrum that ranges from authentic Drake-authored content to bizarre and impossible configurations of Drake's form. Next slide.
The role of the author is becoming more and more ambiguous. Influencers narrate their everyday actions just as Google AI overviews obfuscate the actual authors of information on the internet.
Drake's radical form of theater, in which anyone can play their hand in the narrative of Drizzy, offers the rare opportunity for a truly collective authorship.
Drake is written by everyone and therefore is everyone.
There's nothing that Drake can't relate to. Next slide.
Thank you. We have a song because our presentation's over. Young Money. Oh God.
Really good video.
I'm speechless. What to say? What to say? What to say? Um, in societies where modern conditions of production prevail, um, does everything devolve into theater? And is Drake simply the spectacle?
I have something to say about that. I don't know if how much this, we'll see where if this addresses your question, but I believe that everyone is performing all the time, and I think that's why the extremity of Drake's performances are something that people can really latch onto. Like, I think we have a very different relationship with Drake, but we were both able to kind of meet in the middle to write this paper and to talk about him, because something that we talk about often is that Drake is accessible. He's so accessible because he has so many points, levels of entry. And I think that this sort of like self-aware nature of his performances, at least to me, is something that I can kind of identify with. For other people, like when I was growing up, a lot of boys in my school really authentically loved Drake and felt very represented by him. And I feel like this sort of like, he's like an orb of performance in which like you can access him from any perspective and any position. And I think that's why people, even who hate Drake, still have to listen to Drake and have to have a relationship with him, because his performance is like so open that it's closed, and it's like closed around everyone. That's what I would say about that.
What would I say? I would say that I feel like everything can become Drake, because I see Drake as like a codex or a key, like you look at a map to understanding the world. And you can use the lens of Drake to kind of understand any action, as we saw with Pookie Bear Drakey. And everything can kind of become theater through the lens of looking at the mirror that is Aubrey Drake Graham and seeing what reflects back to you.
One more. What is our role as audience members then in this theater, right? I feel like we're called upon, sometimes we participate. Are we complicit? What role do we play in the Drake theater?
I think Yoni in the stage brought this up to me, my colleague, a fellow Drake theorist. And I told him about theater, and he told me that there were beforehand, like in Greek and traditional Roman theater, audience members would play a much larger role in theater that we kind of don't see anymore now. Nowadays, if you see a performance, there's a strict line, but rather audience members would interact with characters would go and interact with people, and now it's kind of seen as campy, like a Rocky Horror Picture Show. But it used to be normal, because how could you pretend to be someone on stage and then ignore the fact that there's thousands of people watching you in the moment? It is normal to interact with your audience and to treat them like human, because they're also a part of the performance art.
Yeah, I'm reminded of our yeah.
As a fellow sassy man, I feel really seen by him, and I feel like he's like my DEI hire. Like, I love him.
I don't know if I have anything to say past that.
What I wanted to, I'd feel remiss if I speaking of theater, if I didn't mention that you know, the director of the play or the has an intent. So what is Drake's intent in his 15-year-long theatrical performance?
I think that like Drake's desire represents something that's sort of existential and very biological, which is to like proliferate yourself into the next generation. Like, I think if you think about like reproduction across species and like what the sort of central drive of living is or whatever, it's really to like produce the next generation. And we've kind of been I think that culture has been an interrupter in that like core sort of like biological way of engaging your life. And I feel like because Drake has taken on so many different kinds of performances in a way that sort of like disguises what would be at the center and makes him this figure that sort of is nobody, but also is everybody at the same time. I feel like Drake's goal has been to survive as a pop cultural figure, and beyond that, not to really say anything. Like, I think that's why when we were on this like 13-hour phone call writing this paper together after months and months of discussion, and it was time to lock in. We were kind of like getting to this point that Drake is such an apolitical figure, and I think part of the reason that he's been able to sustain himself in the wider culture is because of his lack of politics that are expressed by him. Like, obviously, he's a political figure in the way that he's appropriative. He's a political figure in the way that he's constantly present. He's like so commercial and has really changed a lot about the music industry and the way that success functions hierarchically. And in streaming and all this stuff that I feel like we've talked a lot about today. But I think that it's essential for him to never say, like, to never reveal too much of his hand, to like never make a declaration. And I think this is an interesting moment in the context of the beef, because I feel like Kendrick was coming in and saying like, we don't have time for that anymore. And it's time for someone, me, to make a statement and translate that into pop culture. I don't know how much I believe that that's actually going to last, because I think that people crave comfort and distraction from the terrifying things happening in the world, and that there's only so much time that we have in the context of like really upsetting and oppressive politics to spend our cultural and leisure time like with the arts of the world, focusing on things that are painful to recognize and like histories that are painful to recognize. So I think whether or not Drake returns as Drake, someone will return as Drake in the form of like an apolitical pop star who is able to have a long reign exactly by not expressing any sort of perspective or individual political desire. I don't remember what the original question was, but.
Oh, I just had a quick thing to add. In relation to Drake's story, I don't really think the bulk of it matters, but rather how it ends. And I think he's very aware of that. And I usually think about like Shakespearean play in relation to his story. And he really wants an ending of Midsummer Night's Dream and not Othello. And he's waiting for his Deus Ex Machina right now. He's waiting for this metal machine bird to save him from Kendrick. And we have to wait and see what that is, because I really want him to have like a nice ending. Like, I want him to be happy.
I feel like things you were talking about with more like original or historical forms of theater, like Greek and Roman theater, I think there's something there in like even distress is entertaining. And like, I think that for me as a young woman who was like around a lot of Drake fans, I was like, I hate Drake. He represents like so much misogyny and things that I hate. And like the boys who love him are terrible and like they suck and I don't want to be around them. I think though that as a more abstract figure, it's been really entertaining for me to observe not only Drake, but also like all the little Drakes that have come out of Drake and how they like talk to themselves and talk to each other and then try to talk to women like through each other. And like, I don't know, I think that there's multiple levels of comedy and I don't think all of them are super upfront, but we talk a lot about this question that was posed earlier, like, does Aubrey know who he is underneath Drake and all of these other performances that he does? And like, I think that ultimately when we think about it for too long or talk about it for too long, we get really sad and kind of have to stop thinking about it, because when you think about Drake from a theoretical perspective as an umbrella term, like a sort of framework for understanding or engaging in particular kinds of culture, I feel like it's easy to forget that there's a real person who was like born, who was 3 at one point and who like fell and scraped his knee on the playground or whatever. Like and even just thinking about what you were saying with the explosive in the back and the sort of like the event of actual sensation and feeling occurring for someone who's like had such a crazy life and has had such an absurd life, and everyone could identify with him, but he can't really identify with anyone, I imagine. Like, I'm really curious about it's like how they say that comedians are like, comedy is a mechanism to deal with really sad and painful feelings. And I project that onto him. Like, I think underneath everything, there's something really, really dark happening and it's sad.
It's on my bucket list. Like, I really want to.
I feel like I saw it on my friends' Instagram stories, and that was the sort of like closest I got to real. And I've had friends who like have been to his house and stuff when they were in LA, and like hearing about how they're like, yeah, I'm gonna get the fuck out of here because this is weird as fuck. It has been, I don't know, it's an interesting way of like thinking about proximity and storytelling and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say my closest proximity to is like having friends from Toronto, and they're like, oh yeah, he's weird. Like, and that's it. I'm like, oh, Drake's weird. Like now I know that through like 3 steps of removal. So that's yeah. The Birkins, yes, the hypothetical Birkins. Chekhov's Birkin. Oh yeah. Did you see the first video? Like
There's this amazing video that we'll try to get to people of Drake doing that and then falling and twisting his ankle. And it's so amazing. I just wanted to say that.
he just lays there on the ground, like writhing in pain. Like it's the only time I've seen the clip of him, and it's real. That's a real emotion. He's in pain. He can't get up, and he tore his ACL. And then like You're My Everything is playing behind it, and it's just like really tragic. Like I really felt for him in that moment. It's already starting to happen. Like people are starting to kind of turn on the Kendrick concept after the Super Bowl. There was a lot of pushback, and Drake fans, like we saw with the Pookie Bear Kenny incident, kind of do that for him. They are able to rewrite his narrative without him even having to lift a finger, because they want to believe so badly that he is the hero in their life. He is the hero, and they are supporting the right person, as we've talked previously at length about wanting to be on the right side of history.
No, I think I think in a way, but I don't think in a direct way. Like, I feel like Drake is not the kind of guy who has like such a direct relationship with his fans in an instructive way. Like, I feel like he's not the type to be like, everyone go comment on this person's page and like mob their page or whatever. Like, there are other celebrities that really try to be like the orchestra director of their fan bases, or their fan bases like really need them to be directive. Like, I think Taylor Swift fans have this like very religious relationship with Taylor in a way that like they'll wear what she wears. They'll like do all these analyses of like which color jumpsuit she's going to wear on the tour and like what days and what cities and what corresponds or whatever, in a way that I think is really scary. But I think I was just thinking about like his most recent musical releases, when he's like, I don't care, none of my ops is, as a sort of like a subtle way of being like, I'm still here, I'm trying, I'm not going to say that I'm trying, but for all the people that are like real ones for me, know that you have something to identify with here about like overcoming or lack of like fear in the face of scary and devastating events in your life or whatever. So I think that I feel like this is a moment of fracture for the Drake fandom. I feel like I've had a lot of friends who really loved Drake when they were a little bit younger, up until right now. And they've said to me in passing, like, yeah, I haven't really listened to Drake since the beef. And they don't listen to Kendrick. And it's not because they think that Kendrick won. Kendrick obviously won, but like, it's just because they kind of like can't keep up with it anymore. And I think it's like, it will be interesting to see how a split in his observers manifests as his like script continues to be written by everyone who's looking at him.
I think what's interesting is we didn't touch on his music really, but all of his music is kind of just him narrating his own life. And I think that he really wants that to be like the canonical material that people look at when, after he's long gone, people think about in relation to his life, not an upcoming Netflix documentary that hopefully doesn't come out.
I have one more note on that quickly. I think that like, apart from what he's written, I feel like something that will interrupt the calcification of Drake's figure is the pace of our epistemological moment. Like, things come out so quickly. The fact that there's a Liam Payne documentary already out, like, I feel like I think we're at like a bottom of the toilet bowl moment in culture, where like things occur and then immediately are reported on, analyzed, like fully viewable as historical events, even if they happened last week. And so I feel like what that produces is an ever updating method of engagement rather than like, as a culture, we're all going to take a beat and then come to a consensus. I feel like there's such an overload of information that things are immediately defined, and then that definition has to change because it cannot hold itself. And yeah, I had one more thing, but I forgot.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things in terms of the figures and how they're remembered, whether or not we'll have Drake revisionism, I think is a good question. But fundamentally, when you have like an egregore, like a group of people who are sort of autonomously directing our understanding of a celebrity, of a figure, you can have a lot of that. A good example is that if you try to write an article about a celebrity, you might end up going on a forum, and that will be the place where you find that information. And that might be the last place where you find information. And so fans actually do a lot of the knowledge production that is then mined in order to build our understanding of public figures. And so I think that the people who comment, who post, who create content about cultural figures, in many ways become our sort of pseudo historians, for better or for worse.
I think I have a dream, which is something that Theju said when we were talking about like the prompt for this Sixposium, which was like, is this the death of Drake? Like, no, it's the birth of Aubrey Graham. And I feel like that is the highest, that's my highest hope for him. Like, I think beyond a public spotlight, and like, you know, I hope Drake is good or whatever, but I'm not so tethered to his character. It doesn't mean a lot to like how I've made myself. So this is a very abstract and sort of like distant desire that I have for him as a human being or something. But I think that like whether or not it's in the context of his career, I pray for him that he's able to, in this moment of transition, reconnect with whoever he is or who he will become. But I think that part of that has to happen outside of a spotlight because he's never experienced that life. And like when he said that he was going to take a break before with the tummy issue thing, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be crazy. And then all of this happened. And I feel like it was a little bit karma because like he said he was going to take a break and he didn't. And then this happened. And now it's like, what the fuck is happening with Drake's career? Because he was so up right before for no reason, like up for no reason right before this all happened. And I think something, I don't know, something got him.
I have something quick to add. When you brought up being 50 and texting 20-year-olds, I immediately thought of Dennis Graham and how he could kind of be this lens into Drake's future if he goes down that third route. As Drake says, he's still wearing linen. He's still in the club, you know, like he's around 70. And that kind of future is super bleak. There's like videos of Dennis Graham being extremely creepy to women, especially very like young women that he gets to come to his house, and it's like really a disaster. And I think there's a lot of good PR cleanup around Dennis Graham, but I think that it's like a really like scary like kind of vision into the future that I really hope like he doesn't go down.
And I think that's why the white party picture was so freaky because he really looked like his dad. And I was like, ooh, like you really look like your dad. And that's weird. I mean, it's natural, but it's weird.
One last question.
I wasn't hiding my kid from the world. I was hiding the world from my kid.
You have one last thing? Right.
I have actually an answer for this because there is a clip of Drake hopping in his Phantom with his son, and he recorded in a VHS camera because it's like hard, and he was talking to Adonis, and he has a cup of lean, and he's drinking the lean while talking to his son. So it's definitely Drake. This is like ridiculous behavior. Why would you do that? That's not hard. Like, so it's definitely Drake. Yeah.
This afternoon. Watch this conclusion. This afternoon, we got to explore so many different facets of Aubrey, Drake, Graham. I think the prompt of the end, I think, was extremely fruitful as we considered his spectacular nature, his multifaceted nature, his flexible, almost protean nature, like being able to take any shape. I still can't shake away the sort of fishery in question of if this is the end of Drake, then what is the alternative? Perhaps that'll be the theme for next year. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Gala. Thank you, Theju. There's still some drinks around. Mingle, have some fun. You're in the presence of people who like the similar figure as you, so feel free to chat along. Oh yeah, 100%.